Alright, the first thing I'm going to check is the alternator, which in this truck is belt driven. I'm just going to check to make sure that the belt itself isn't frayed or cracked or anything like that, and it doesn't have an excess amount of play. I'm trying to make sure it's between like about 1/2 and 3/4 of an inch. Also going to check the water pump over on this side of the passenger side and check to make sure that it's properly secured. There's no leaks in and around the water pump, and that again on this belt it doesn't have an excessive amount of play or have any cracks or fraying on that at all. I'm going to check where the exhaust begins to go out of the engine compartment. Just make sure there's not any extra black carbon soot on there. Make sure that there's no big dents or any issues with the exhaust itself. I'm going to check the brake chamber, make sure there aren't any leaks. Check the brake hoses, make sure that there aren't any leaks and that there's not any cracks or bubbles in the hose. On the truck I'm going to be inspecting, I'll be looking at the brake pads on the disc brakes, making sure there's no grease or debris in there, and also checking the indicators to make sure that there's an acceptable amount of brake pad left. While I'm over here, I'll also check the suspension, look at the shock absorbers. Where the two parts come together, you want to look for leaks and stuff like that. And then down on the springs, I'm going to look for any cracked, missing, or shifted leaf springs. And also check the U-bolts, make sure they aren't bent or missing, or there's not any issues with that at all. Again, on the passenger side, I'm going to want to check the coolant levels to make sure it's between the full and the minimum level on that. Moving around to the driver's side of the engine compartment, I'm going to check the power steering fluid and make sure that it is above the area where it says you have to add. And then I'm also going to check the oil level, make sure it's above the full line. Also, look at the washer fluid, make sure that there is an adequate amount of washer fluid in the vehicle. I'll also be checking the steering box, looking at all the hoses and connections, making sure that there's no leaks, that it is properly secured. Look at all the connections and joints to make sure there's not any issues there. And examine all the hoses that are coming out of the steering box to make sure that there aren't any leaks or any other issues. I'll also examine the other steering components in the vehicle to make sure there aren't any bent rods or missing bolts or anything like that. And then I'll repeat the same inspection for the brake system and suspension as I did on the passenger side. Over here, I'm also going to look at the air compressor just to make sure that that is in good shape. I believe on this one is right over here. And that would complete my engine compartment inspection.